Molecules in motion. This presentation is going to talk about the basis for all of the chemical reactions that happen in living things. That basis, that basic thing, is molecules. Without molecules, chemical reactions wouldn't happen. And one of our main focuses for this unit is two chemical reactions called photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So in order to understand those, you have to have a little bit of background knowledge about what molecules are, what they're made of, and what kinds of molecules you find in living things. So here we go. Let's start with a quick review. Cells make up all living things, and cells need energy to sustain life. They get this energy from molecules. Let's back up a step. A molecule is made of atoms. If you didn't get a chance to look at the atom videos that I posted in addition to this presentation, please stop now, go back, take a look at those two videos. So now that you've come back from looking at those videos, you know that an atom is a really tiny thing, and that atoms make up something slightly larger called molecules. All cells are made of the same elements. What's a macromolecule? If you're following along in your book, find the red or blue title that matches this. All matter is made of atoms. Atoms, we know, kind of look like this. They have a nucleus in the center, and that nucleus has most of the mass of the atom, and it has protons and neutrons in it. And then it's got electrons zooming around the outside part of the nucleus with empty space in between. Different types of atoms combine to form molecules and compounds. Those atoms are joined together by things called chemical bonds. It's kind of like if two people were holding hands. That would represent a chemical bond. Some molecules are really small, like carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide has 3 atoms in it, 2 oxygens and 1 carbon atom. Some molecules are really huge. Some of them contain thousands of atoms to make one molecule. These are called macromolecules, and they're so large that we have to break them down into subunits and talk about those individual subunits as part of the molecule. Macromolecules are what we're focusing on for this presentation, because those are what we talk about when we talk about things that make up living things. So what's a macromolecule? Cell activities involve chemical reactions. The way cells work is based on chemical reactions. In a chemical reaction, basically one of two things can happen. Either the bonds between atoms are broken, or they are formed and fused together. Atoms that are joined by new bonds make new materials or compounds. So you can imagine if we looked at this carbon dioxide molecule and you broke apart the atoms and then you formed them into something else, it would make a new material. Or if you took this protein molecule and broke apart all the atoms that make that, then it would form something new. Cells use chemical energy to break apart and form these bonds, and that's what gives us the basis for life activities like growth and reproduction, repair, things like that. So molecules are constantly in motion. They're never still. Even the molecules that make up solid objects like your desktop or your tabletop or your pencil, even though that's a solid object, the molecules that make it are constantly in motion. And that happens, as you saw in the Bill Nye video, because the nucleus of each atom vibrates, and that vibration causes it to move around. Molecules are in constant motion, bumping into each other and bouncing off everything around them, bouncing off other molecules, and kind of flying through space. Large molecules, or macromolecules, support cell function. What one feature do all 4 types of macromolecules have in common? They have one thing in common, and that's that they all contain carbon atoms. That kind of defines the molecules that make up living things. Living things are all made of carbon. So you don't have a large molecule chart, but as you take a look at the questions, you see we're going to go over 4 types of macromolecules. The first one is called carbohydrates. Maybe you've heard of carbohydrates when somebody talks about the food that they're eating, and that's because remember that the food you eat was once living, and those living things are made of these macromolecules. So carbohydrates can be broken down into subunits called simple sugars. That should give you a clue that anything made of sugar is a carbohydrate. The atoms that make up carbohydrates include carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. And organisms use carbohydrates for energy. This is where we get the energy that your body needs every day in order to do all of its functions, to move, to grow, to repair, to do things that you can see, like moving your arm up and down, to do things that you can't see. And where do we find carbohydrates? We find them in glucose, bread, grains, potatoes, starch, cellulose, and glycogen. And again, a lot of these things you recognize as things you eat. The second type of macromolecule is lipids. Lipids have 2 parts. They have the glycerol and the fatty acid, or the head and the tail. You can see one lipid macromolecule looks like kind of like a lollipop with 2 sticks. It has a head and 2 tails. These lipids are made again of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. Organisms use these lipids for making cell membranes and to store energy. So if you have extra carbohydrates in your body that your body can store, then it turns them into lipid molecules. And we all know from our previous presentations how important the cell membranes are for any cell. Where do we find lipids? Lipids are found in things with fats, oils, and waxes. So you can imagine bacon has a lot of lipid molecules in it. Our third type of macromolecule is proteins. Proteins are made of subunits called amino acids. They have atoms such as carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and sulfur. And organisms use proteins basically for everything. They use proteins for growth, repair, to build structures, and for controlling chemical reactions. So a protein is a really, really important macromolecule to any living thing. It's how the living things function. You can find proteins in meats, eggs, cheese, and beans. And finally, our final type of macromolecule is the nucleic acid. These have subunits called nucleotides, and you can see in the picture here's one nucleotide. They contain carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and phosphorus atoms. And these macromolecules are used for storing genetic information. Examples are DNA and RNA. So nucleic acids are what make up your DNA. And that, of course, is what tells your body what proteins to make and how to function and what jobs to do. Our final molecule that I want to talk about is not a macromolecule. Macromolecules, we've said, are made of thousands of atoms bonded together. They're used to build the parts of a cell, and they get broken down for energy. Water, on the other hand, is made of just 3 atoms, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Water provides the environment for all the chemical reactions that have to happen in a cell. One cool thing about water is an essential molecule. Without it, nothing living on Earth would be able to survive. One cool thing about it is that the way it's structured gives it a positive end and a negative end. The hydrogen end of a water molecule is the positive side, kind of like when you think about magnets having a positive and a negative, and that allows things to be attracted to water or to be repelled from water, which is a pretty cool feature. Okay, if you have any questions while you're answering your assignment or while you're finishing your assignment, please send me a message.